Onion architecture and hexagonal architecture are both architectural patterns for designing software applications with a focus on decoupling, maintainability, and putting the business logic at the center of the application. Both patterns are technically almost identical, even though they have different names and are presented by different visual representations or diagrams. If we look at an onion architectural diagram, we can see the different layers of an application. And as you might have guessed, the name of the architecture actually originates from this diagram itself. The innermost layer is the domain layer, which contains the domain model and the domain logic. This layer is surrounded by the application layer, which contains the application logic. The flow of dependencies follows an inward direction with the use of the dependency inversion principle, where outer layers depend on inner layers, but the inner layers remain unaware of those outer layers. That being said, this diagram has led to a lot of confusion in the software engineering community because the user interface components as well as the data access components are positioned in the same layer. This made many engineers draw incorrect conclusions that the onion architecture isn't entirely secure because UI components can directly interact with the data source. But that's simply not true. The diagram here is just a visual representation of the architecture, and it doesn't mean that the components that are on the same level or visually located in the same onion layer are actually able to interact with each other. Layers are not meant to group components, but rather emphasize the direction of dependencies. If we look at a hexagonal architectural diagram and start drawing concentric circles around components, we'll quickly notice that the diagram actually reminds us of the onion architectural diagram, doesn't it? This means that conceptually, both architectures are essentially the same, although they may be applied slightly differently in practice. Furthermore, the naming conventions and some design decisions we made in this course might vary from what you may have noticed in other projects, and that's okay. The important thing is that you understand the core concepts and principles behind the architecture, and that you're able to take advantage of them in your future Nest.js projects.